Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of July of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk probably the most important update that currently determines the entire situation along the entire line of combat contact. And according to reliable sources, most regions of Ukraine today, the heat will be 35-41 Celsius by Celsius, sometimes up to 40-41 by Celsius in the south, while in the far west there might be short-term rains and thunderstorms. Most regions of Ukraine will experience dry and hot weather today, with temperature 35-39 during the day, with only short-term rain and thunderstorms in the evening in the far west of the country. In some areas in the south, extreme heat of up to 40-41 by Celsius is expected. This is a very important piece of news because of this situation, because of this hot weather, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are able to conduct any more or less big offensive operation along the entire line of combat contact, because first of all it's very difficult. It's very difficult and very dangerous. So that's why, as for current updates, as for the situation on the ground, during the previous 24 hours we got significant number of updates about artillery strikes, missile strikes, aviation strikes, and almost no updates about additional progress on the ground. But this is just one side of the medal. Another important thing is that Ukrainians, due to this hot weather, suffer significant problems with electricity. Some sources are saying that huge blackouts in Ukraine today, in my area, since 8 p.m. last night. So some people, some regions of Ukraine has blackouts since yesterday of 8 p.m. And it's now almost 4 p.m. according to the author of this post, and no electricity for him, particularly for him, for the previous 24 hours already. So this post we received few hours ago before we start making the video, so most likely some regions of Ukraine are without electricity for already entire day, for more than 24 hours, and this situation will just improve and improve and improve. And this is probably another thing that the Russians are trying to test and to understand what exactly is going to happen with Ukraine as a result, due to the missile strikes that have been taking place in the special military operation. And now the Russians try to understand, do they need to attack Ukraine more, the Ukraine energy facilities more, or the level of damage they managed to deal is enough for Ukraine to keep the situation as is till the beginning of the peace negotiations. Because the things that we can see right now with Ukraine energy facilities probably will be much worse during the winter period of time. And when talking today, it's already probably most biggest nightmare ever for the Ukrainians who are living on the territory of Ukraine. Now let's move to the line of combat contact. As we discussed during the previous 24 hours, we received just updates about artillery strikes and missile strikes and aviation strikes. The sources reported that the Sumy and Chernihiv regions are receiving a massive missile attack today, and also heavy FABs. After objective control and additional reconnaissance, the Iskanders arrive along the Ukraine Armed Forces air traffic control road. The headquarters of the Ukraine Armed Forces in the north are trying to guess whether there will be movement or not. They're monitoring the border area. So what can we say? The Russians are saying, the Russian sources, that they've been bombing the Chernihiv and Sumy areas since the beginning of the morning, and now the Ukrainians trying to understand whether it's artillery preparation or just some attacks from the Russian side. Telling the truth, I believe that Russian artillery strikes, massive artillery strikes, tightly connected with the situation that's been taking place along the border in Sumy, of course, and Chernihiv area. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking about the Ukrainian attempts, how the Ukrainians were using a significant number of drones, basically a swarm of drones, and how the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian energy facilities along the border. And according to these geolocations that we have already seen, we can make a conclusion that Ukrainians deal significant damage to the Russian energy facilities. And we got lots of reports from the Russian sources about blackouts along the border as well. And as I understand, today's artillery strikes along Chernigov and Sumy area were something like act of revenge on the situation with Russian energy facilities along the border. Today we got additional video how the previous night the Ukrainians destroyed another very important building, part of another, let's say, infrastructural building. Construction was destroyed as a result of FPV drone strike. Now let's move to Kharkiv direction. We have a lot of very interesting updates, but as we discussed, mainly the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions with artillery and aviations. In this video we can see significant number of FPV drone strikes, artillery strikes on Ukrainian forces along the border, basically on Zolochiv direction. And now let's move to Kharkiv itself. We have just one video. In this video, for example, we can see a Ukrainian who was filming the arrivals of Russian FABs somewhere in the northern direction in the vicinity of the village by the name of Ruski Tishki. Just a regular update without something specific or something big, just regular strikes in the direction and no attempts neither from the Russian or the Ukrainian side to attack each other. As for Volchansk, as you can see, we have a lot of very interesting, lots of geolocations, and most of them about how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians in the forest between Seversky Donetsk River and Volchansk itself, in the farms in the southern part, the main supply roads from the east to the village of Tikha. The Russians were using FABs, RBK 500, cluster aviation bombs, and many other different types of weapon, but the Russians were conducting no attempts to attack the Ukrainians on the ground. There was just one operation that was conducted by the Russians, and most likely not even yesterday. In this video we can see the video and the episodes that was made by the Presidential Brigade of Armored Forces of Ukraine of how they were bombing and attacking the Russians in the southern part of the northern Vovchansk. This is very important video because if I remember just yesterday we had yellow color above this territory because we have two reports. First we had the video of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainians in this building, and later we got additional update from neutral mappers that this territory was recaptured by the Ukrainians as a result of counter-offensive operation. And just one day later, today on the 16th of July, we got the video of how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians in this area. So most likely first the Russians lost positions, or at least the Ukrainians managed to break through and to stretch their forces between the buildings, and during the previous 24 hours the Russians were trying to clear this territory and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. Based on this video we have adjusted the map again and we have colored this territory as an area under complete Russian control. Now let's move further. We have additional updates. Once again, significant number of aviation strikes, significant number of artillery strikes, but without any attempts neither from the Russian nor from the Ukrainian side to conduct something like a full-scale offensive operation with the purpose, let's say from the Russian side to expand their positions in the southern part, or from the Ukrainian side to unblock Ukrainians in the northern part and to connect them with the village by the name of Tikha. Now let's move further. Let's talk about northern Kupiansk direction and Kupiansk direction itself. We have very interesting videos. For example, in this video we can see another Russian reconnaissance operation. The Russians managed to discover a small warehouse and a Ukrainian truck with a significant number of munition. And this video we can see the Ukrainian soldiers who were unpacking and loading the truck. And the Russians attacked this territory with Iskander, and as a result of strike, the entire ammo depot was destroyed, which obviously will lead to significant, not losses, but it will force the Ukrainians to suffer problems in the area of Barova, in the area of Russian main activity. I remind you that during the previous days we got lots of updates about the Russian attempts to attack in direction of Oskol River, and basically the ammo depot of Oskol direction was destroyed. And we got more and more videos from this direction. We have lots of explosions, lots of artillery strikes, and lots of FPV drones, but we haven't received almost even a single video or even a single report or update that confirm additional Russian progress on the ground. And as I understand, mainly this situation is tightly connected with the very hot weather, and that it's very impossible to conduct any offensive. It's too risky, and probably it's not a very good idea. But let's see what is going to be next. Now let's move to Siversk direction. Another the same story. The Russians are bombing Siversk heavily with significant number of artillery strikes, aviation bombs, and so on, but without any changes on the ground. I would like to point your attention to the increased activity of the Russian forces along MO3 road between Slaviansk and Bakhmut. During the previous 24 hours, we got additional video from this direction of how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions, but and it's not something unique. It's the same videos that I've been receiving from many directions for the previous years, months, and so on. But the thing is that now this direction we can see very often, this direction being included into Ministry of Defense report of Russian Federation for the previous few weeks or even months, for lots of times. Almost every single week we have 3-4 reports from this direction about additional Russian activity, about the artillery strikes, aviation strikes, about brigades that were damaged and attacked by the Russians. As for geolocations, we see nothing. Basically nothing. According to different mappers, according to different military experts, we also don't receive any significant updates about any direction. But the situation in this area reminds me the situation that we could see in the vicinity of Donetsk, New York. Now we have lots of updates of how the Russians are capturing one building after another, but a month ago we've been receiving nothing from this direction. And the thing is that if you follow the Ministry of Defense report, you might find that during the previous 4 months we got a lot of updates from the village by the name of Shumy. Almost every single week we got 3-4 days in a row when the Russians were reporting about additional activity of how the Russians were bombing. So just when talking about geolocations, videos, map changings, and reports of different military experts on the ground, we've been receiving nothing about Donetsk in New York. And just after conducting of successful pipeline operation, we start receiving lots of updates from this territory. But following the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, we've been receiving updates from Shumy for every single day in the past, for every single day since the beginning of March or February, or Ukrainians' attempts to attack Russian positions between these landfills and terracons. And now we can see the same situation between Zaliznyanska, Golubovka, and Privilya. So comparing these two situations, we can make a conclusion that maybe the Russians do have some plans to begin offensive operation along MO3 road. Of course, not today, not now, but maybe in a month or in 2 months. As for Chasiv Yar, nothing special. We have additional reports and updates from Donetsk, New York agglomeration. The Russians continue bombing, continue attacking. There is some progress on the ground, especially in the village by the name of Druzhba, but we haven't received any geolocations that can confirm this information. Just to post from different sources on the ground that during the previous 24 hours the Russians established complete control over the village by the name of Stepova, and that from now on this territory is under complete Russian control. Most likely tomorrow some mappers will adjust the map and we will color or add additional contested area. As for the central part, no changes, no attacks, no videos, as you can see. Once again, I believe that this silence is connected with the very hot weather. New York, the Russians reported about very heavy clashes along the Zalizna Street and Ivano-Franko Street. As we discussed in the previous update, according to many mappers, the many mappers have already colored this territory as area under complete Russian control, but starting of today we are start receiving updates about continuous clashes in this area. Now let's move to the western Avdiivka direction. We have just 2 small gains on the ground. The first gains on the ground took place in the vicinity of Lozovatska, We have already discussed this video how the Russian tank was attacking the Ukrainian position, not tank but probably armored vehicle was attacking the Ukrainians along destroy line with machine gun. Later this vehicle was damaged by the Ukrainian drone, but basically based on this video most of the mappers have adjusted their maps and we did the same, and we have colored this territory under complete Russian control. And we have additional gains in the side of Novosilovka-Pershi. The situation we have already discussed in the previous update. The Russians managed to capture 2 Ukrainian soldiers right exactly in this building, right exactly there, and based on this video most of the mappers have adjusted their maps as well. We did the same. As for the south in Novosilovka-Pershi, we continue receiving updates about the Russian FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian light vehicles. Most likely the Ukrainians are finishing or about to finish the evacuation process. Most likely they will abandon some rearguard forces inside of the village with the purpose to slow the Russians down as much as possible. But anyway, the front line is moving further in the western direction towards the city of Selidova. As for Krasnogorovka, considering this area, we have just one report about significant problems between in the 79th and 59th Brigade of Armored Forces of Ukraine. Recently, the Ukrainians initiated the criminal investigation about some bad criminal investigations on Ukrainian commanders of 59th Brigade. As for 79th Brigade, currently they're trying to gather their forces in the vicinity of Konstantinovka because they expect that the Russians are about to launch another full-scale operation with the purpose to enter the southeastern part of the stronghold. Most likely the Russians will wait when the weather is stabilized, and after that they're gonna do this attack. As for other directions, as you can see, nothing special, just some Mulmur missiles, some strikes in the area. So once again, the Russians are trying to keep some distance due to the weather. Most likely they can't be very active. The Ukrainians, telling the truth, are doing the same. But as for the Ukrainians, today we got very interesting report from Mariupol. For example, according to information we have, the head of General Staff of Armed Forces of Russian Federation during the previous 24 hours probably visited the command center of the Group of Forces East, the group of forces that is responsible for Russian offensive operation in South Donetsk direction. We are talking about Velika Novoselovka, Ugledar, about this territory. I'm not sure what was the exact purposes of the general, of the commander-in-chief. Maybe he arrived to get some words to soldiers, or maybe he came to this area to understand whether the Russians are able to continue moving further and whether everything is ready to defeat the Ukrainians completely between Kurakhova, Konstantinopol and Velika Novoselovka. Maybe something interesting the general, the commander, brought with him. And this is not the most important topic. The most important is that the armed forces of Ukraine during the previous 24 hours, from the night from 15th till 16th of July, or probably from 14th till 15th, attacked this territory with significant number of attack missiles. And as you can see, maybe they were trying to hit the Russian commander-in-chief Gerasimov of General Staff, who knows. But as a result of the strike, the Ukrainians managed to suppress and to destroy the Russian air defense. But as you can see, they used around 5 or even more attack systems, missiles. So as you can see, the Ukrainians didn't count the number of missiles, so most likely they were trying to hit something very important. I'm not sure whether they managed to hit the commander, the head of the Russian army, Gerasimov, this person, the chief of general staff, but most likely they were trying to do this. As for Zaporozhye direction, nothing special, just regular artillery and aviation activity. In this direction, the Russians were using, for example, RBK 500 cluster, let's say, aviation bombs. Now let's talk about Kherson direction. The same story, just artillery strikes, Mulmur strikes, missile strikes. In this video, for example, we can see the Ukrainians who were let's say unloading some munition to some local warehouse, and the Russians destroyed this area as a result of Mulmur missile. So the helicopter attacked this territory and the building was destroyed just with one shot. And the same things were taking place in this area during the previous 24 hours, and nothing special and Odessa region. Another warehouse was discovered by the Russians, and according to information we have, this warehouse, the Ukrainians were keeping Navy drones, Bayraktars, different reconnaissance drones in this area. The Russians discovered some suspicious activity of the Ukrainian forces, and as a result of Iskander strike, that this warehouse was destroyed. So as you can see, due to the weather, the Russian forces on the ground weren't able to conduct any more or less full-scale offensive. So that's why that was the period, or that was the time of work of Russian artillery and aviation and missiles. A lot of explosions, lots of warehouses were destroyed. So the Russians decided to waste this period of time to prepare the forces before possible offensive after the more or less better weather comes in the Ukrainian region. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.